Life is always full of paradoxes that make us ponder. Why do misfortunes befall those who live good lives? This question not only reflects the search for fairness, but also touches upon the profound nature of human existence. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering is neither a punishment nor a privilege for anyone. It is an inevitable and universal part of human life. When we begin to realize that suffering is not something that happens exclusively to certain people, but rather an inevitable part of life, we are invited to embark on a deeper journey to explore and understand the invaluable lessons that Buddhism offers. This enlightenment comes not only from the abstraction of theory, but also from vivid stories, sacred quotes, and profound legends rich in human experience. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree, he directly realized that all beings must face suffering, and this awareness opened the door to the path of enlightenment. Through this, he taught that suffering, dukkha, is not a calamity reserved for the weak or the unlucky, but a universal reality that encompasses all classes and statuses. By knowing the truth of suffering, we can transcend it, a subtle teaching that many later meditation masters have continued and interpreted in their own unique ways. In Buddhist teachings, there is a profound idea. Suffering is the condition for enlightenment. It is no coincidence that many great masters, monks, and individuals with deep wisdom have gone through extremely challenging periods in their lives. Let's reflect on the life of Milarepa, one of the greatest saints in Tibetan Buddhism. Milarepa, in his youth, committed many wrongdoings driven by oppression and hatred. Later, with deep remorse and a strong desire for liberation, he sought out the Master Marpa to learn the Dharma. After enduring countless hardships and undergoing intense penance, he eventually became one of the highest enlightened practitioners revered to this day. There is a story about a woman named Elena, who lived in a peaceful village nestled among the lush hills of rural Europe. Elena was known in the region for her kindness, gentle eyes, and her spirit of always being ready to help others. Though she lived a simple life, she brought joy to those around her. But as with the impermanence of life, happiness is as fragile as the morning mist. One late autumn day, when the last leaf had just fallen from the tree in her backyard, a sudden flood swept away Elena's small house. The fury of nature not only took her possessions, but also carried away cherished memories and the sense of safety she once had. In that moment of panic, Elena asked herself, why do bad things happen to people who have done no wrong? Amidst the ruins and her doubts, an elderly neighbor, respected in the village for his calm and understanding, advised her to seek out a meditation master who lived in a hermitage on the other side of the valley. Suffering is not a punishment, he said, but a natural part of the human experience. The important thing is not to avoid it, but to learn to listen to it. Elena decided to embark on the journey. Along the way, she began to see the simple yet profound beauty of life. The morning dew on the leaves, the chirping of birds calling to each other in the forest, or the gentle smile of strangers willing to share a warm loaf of bread. Step by step, these small things began to soothe the wounds in her heart. When she finally met the meditation master, he did not preach or offer grand words of advice. Instead, he handed Elena a small wooden box and said, inside this box, there is nothing, just like your mind at this moment, but you can fill it with all the beautiful things you have experienced and share them with others. From that moment on, Elena began her healing journey. not only for herself but also for those around her. She returned to the village, but this time she carried an inner light, helping others who had also fallen into misfortune. The debris from the flood no longer symbolized loss, but became the fuel for her to rebuild her life with gratitude and compassion. This story illustrates that suffering, when perceived correctly and used appropriately, can become the fuel for liberation. Like rotting wood, if left untouched, it will decay, but if ignited, it will provide warmth and light. It also reflects the spirit of the Buddha's teaching. In the midst of the changing world, only a peaceful mind is a solid refuge. And just like Elena, each of us, if we learn to listen to our suffering, face it with mindfulness and compassion, can emerge from the darkness with a heart that is brighter, stronger, and more compassionate. A core practice in Buddhism for transforming suffering is metta meditation, contemplating one's own and others' pain with love and compassion. In the Metta Sutta, the Buddha teaches, keep your heart as a mother would love her only child. Carry this heart with all beings. When we practice loving kindness, we begin to see that our suffering is not unique. Others are suffering too, and this empathy helps us detach from our own pain while expanding our hearts to develop compassion. It is this very compassion that serves as the most powerful remedy for healing the heart. A beautiful image in Buddhism is that of Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, Guanyin, the Bodhisattva who listens to the cries of all beings. It is not because she is free from suffering, but because she has the ability to embrace suffering and transform it into loving kindness. Avalokiteshvara is a symbol of soft power, not resisting suffering, but moving through it with love and understanding. Thus, instead of trying to eliminate suffering from life, something impossible, we learn to walk with it, to understand it, and through this, we grow. It is only through understanding suffering that we truly grasp the value of happiness and live a life not only for ourselves, but also for others. Once we clearly see this, we will no longer ask, why do bad things happen to good people? Instead, we will gently smile and say, suffering is a part of the journey, and I am on the right path. After countless setbacks and life's ups and downs, perhaps the hardest thing is not overcoming suffering, but sitting still and facing it head on. No more struggling, no more asking, why me? Only a deeper question, what can I learn from this pain? It is in that moment, when we no longer try to escape or resist, that transformation begins. Accepting suffering does not mean resigning to misfortune, but igniting the light of understanding to illuminate the true nature of life. This is the first yet profoundly important step on the path to wisdom, where the truth of dukkha, suffering in the Four Noble Truths, is not just understood intellectually, but deeply internalized through our lived experience. From this point, things that seem broken begin to form the foundation of something stronger, more mindful, more grounded. The Buddha once taught, just like a person who is struck by an arrow, if they do not remove the arrow and keep blaming, the wound will never heal. Suffering is the same. If we spend our time asking why this happened to us or trying to deny it, we unknowingly prolong our pain. But if we have the courage to stop, observe, and accept it as a natural part of life, we begin to heal. Acceptance does not equate to weakness. On the contrary, it is a sign of a mature mind. As His Holiness the Dalai Lama once said, we cannot avoid suffering, but we can choose how to face it. From that, compassion is born. Once a man who had lost his son came to the Buddha in deep grief, hoping that the Buddha could restore life to his child. Instead of comforting or healing him, the Buddha said, "On this earth, no one has ever escaped death. If your son has passed away, you are not alone in your loss." This response was not to cause the man more pain, but to free him from the feeling of isolation in his suffering. One of the greatest causes of suffering is thinking, "I am the only one experiencing this." But when we realize that suffering is a universal experience, we feel connected to humanity, to life itself, and compassion begins to sprout. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha teaches, a mind that is not disturbed by praise or blame, by pleasure or pain, that is the mind of the liberated one. This does not mean that the enlightened being no longer experiences suffering, but that they are no longer controlled by it. Just as a swimmer must allow themselves to be submerged by the water a few times before learning how to float, we must sometimes let life drown us in order to learn how to rise above it. Look at the image of a lotus growing from the muddy water. Without the mud, without the murky water, how could the lotus blossom and release its fragrance? This is a beautiful metaphor for the spiritual journey. Suffering is the mud, and mindfulness is the sunlight that helps us rise above it. Therefore, acceptance is not about giving up. It is about opening our hearts to see the true nature of life, to stop running away, and to begin building peace from within. And when we accept our own pain, we also become more patient, gentle, and compassionate toward the suffering of others. Thus, compassion flows like a sweet stream through the desert of life. When you embrace your wounds with understanding and love, you not only heal yourself, but you also become a source of comfort to others. Thich Nhat Hanh. This is the most profound power of acceptance. It does not weaken us. Rather, it is the starting point of compassion and wisdom. In moments when our souls have endured the harsh ups and downs of life, we slowly realize that suffering is not just a barrier between dreams and reality, but also a springboard that allows us to rise. It is no longer a time to escape in anxiety, but a moment to listen deeply to the call from within, the voice of awakening and maturity. Every pain, whether immense or fragile, carries a valuable lesson, like pieces of a puzzle in the grand picture of life. Instead of avoiding or denying it, we should step forward, observe, and feel the transformation. It is through understanding and accepting difficult moments that we begin to uncover the hidden strengths and inner values we never noticed before. Like the landscape after a storm, each sharp raindrop has washed away the dust, leaving behind vibrant, blooming flowers. Pain paves the way for peace, broadening our vision and nurturing our hearts. Through this, our journey becomes more meaningful, imbued with compassion and wisdom, helping us not only survive challenges, but also live fully with ourselves. In each moment of facing hardship, we are tested and our souls are enriched. As stated in the Dhammapada, the Buddha taught, suffering is not an enemy, but a teacher. This highlights that when we choose to face and learn from suffering, we discover the latent strength within us. Consider the story of Milarepa, the legendary Tibetan Buddhist yogi. Before becoming an enlightened sage, Milarepa endured great hardships and committed serious mistakes. However, those very wounds of the soul became the inspiration that forged his resilience, nurtured his compassion, and ultimately led to enlightenment. His story clearly illustrates that if we learn the lessons from suffering, it can become a launching pad for transformation and growth. Suffering also teaches us that all emotions, even the most negative ones, have their value in our life journey. When we face pain, we learn to let go of unnecessary attachments and embrace the emptiness of the soul with compassion. As Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, each time we endure a pain, we are polishing our hearts to make them softer and more open to others. Take the story of Liam, a man living in a quiet northern European town who once had a seemingly perfect life, a happy family, stable work, and good health. But then disaster struck. An accident took his beloved wife away. In that moment, everything collapsed. He once thought he could never go on living without waking up to her familiar smile and gaze beside him. However, after months of sinking into darkness, Liam found a small book in his wife's old room, a simplified translation of the Buddha's teachings. In it, there was a note from her: "Suffering is not the end. It is the beginning of an inward journey." From that moment, Liam embarked on his inner journey. He learned meditation, attended Buddhist retreats in Thailand, and gradually transformed his pain into deep compassion. Soon he became a mindfulness meditation guide for those who had lost loved ones, especially fathers, mothers, and spouses who had been swept away in unspeakable loneliness. Liam did not forget his own pain, but it was because of it that he opened a new path, not only healing himself but also becoming a small light for other lost souls. Liam's story reminds us that suffering does not come to break us, but to refine us, like a skilled craftsman polishing a rough stone into a shining gem. If we have the courage to face it, the patience to stay with it, then suffering itself becomes the path, not leading us further from ourselves, but bringing us back closer, deeper into who we truly are. The Dhammapada also emphasizes that a mind that is not disturbed by praise or blame, by pleasure or pain, this is the mind of one who is liberated. This guidance helps us find peace amid life's storms. It means that when we learn to keep our hearts awake, we not only overcome suffering, but we also become more grounded before any challenge. Additionally, the image of the lotus blooming from the muddy water is a powerful symbol in Buddhist culture. Without the mud, how could the lotus bloom and release its fragrance? Similarly, without experiencing hardships, we would never fully appreciate the true meaning of happiness. When we realize that every wound, every painful moment is an opportunity for growth, we no longer fear the challenges of life. Instead, we learn to view and embrace them with gratitude, transforming every tear into a defining moment on the path toward freedom and enlightenment. Through this process of facing and accepting suffering, we not only cultivate resilience, but also discover an inner light that makes life fuller and more meaningful. This is not just a philosophy of a religion or a system of thought, but a timeless lesson of life that each of us needs to remember. Living a life without avoiding suffering, but instead building inner strength to face challenges, is the true path to lasting happiness. When we pay attention to life's bitter experiences, we come to realize that they are not enemies to be avoided, but precious seeds that help us nurture resilience and courage. As the Buddha taught, recognizing that suffering is an inevitable part of life not only frees us from illusions of eternal happiness, but also opens the door to spiritual maturity. Instead of enduring suffering passively or trying to ignore it, we should turn inward, where every challenge is an opportunity to refine ourselves. A profound example of this perspective can be found in a story from the Buddha's life. One day, as he and his disciples walked through a region suffering from a prolonged famine, the people were weak, and many had died due to starvation. The air was filled with despair. Out of compassion and fear for their health, the disciples urged the Buddha to leave the area quickly to avoid any danger to their safety. But the Buddha smiled and said, "It is exactly where there is suffering that we must be present. If we turn away from suffering, our compassion will be nothing but empty words." Thus he stayed with the villagers. While he could not perform miracles to conjure food, he sat with them, listening to their stories, teaching them meditation to calm their minds and bodies, helping them unite and share what little they had, and most importantly, giving them hope. The miracle, if any, was that from his presence and mindfulness, the villagers began to rebuild their community from their own inner strength and trust. This story powerfully demonstrates that it is when we dare to face suffering with an open heart, with our full presence, that true compassion can arise. This compassion is not a weak pity, but absolute strength. The strength to step into the darkness and carry with us the light of our own heart. And this is exactly what each of us can do in our daily lives. When we witness others in suffering, or when we ourselves fall into misfortune, instead of avoiding it, we can try to stay quietly, peacefully, and with mindfulness. Because sometimes simply being fully present can be the most profound act of compassion. Moreover, the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh further affirm this. We cannot bypass suffering. Only by being in the midst of suffering can we cultivate compassion, patience, and self-mastery. This shows that developing resilience requires us to confront challenges directly, turning the wounds of the past into the strength to overcome the present and build a better future. In fact, it has been proven that those who accept suffering, rather than running from it, tend to find the deeper value in life. Like the lotus that blooms from the muddy waters, suffering, when faced and accepted, becomes the inspiration that nurtures our spirit, driving us to keep moving forward. Through this process, life is no longer a series of battles against adversity, but a journey of exploration, learning, and deeper self-understanding. Thus, developing resilience, rather than avoiding suffering, is the key to opening the door to a meaningful life, where we not only find inner peace but also become a source of inspiration for others. Through each step of our growth, we come to realize that every pain carries a lesson, and only when we learn to embrace every emotion, whether joy or sorrow, can we truly live freely and fully. In our journey of facing hardships and pain, we slowly discover that within those very challenges lies boundless strength to transform our lives. Suffering is not the end of all hope. It is the springboard that brings us closer to profound understanding and genuine compassion. Only by empathizing with the losses and challenges that break our hearts can we cultivate the courage, gratitude, and steadfastness to overcome any adversity. Through each piece of the story, from the Buddha's quiet footsteps in the land of famine, to the complete presence of souls brave enough to face pain, we learn that peace does not come from avoiding difficulties, but from the process of accepting and transforming them. It is only when we dare to witness our own pain and that of others that we discover the true meaning of life, a journey that is never perfect, but always opens new horizons for the soul. Like the light of dawn after a long night, Suffering will make way for enlightenment if we know how to listen, perceive, and cherish each present moment. And in the darkest of nights, compassion and mindfulness will lead the way, igniting hope and turning every challenge into a valuable lesson, helping us grow and live more fully each day. In conclusion, life is not just a sequence of joyful moments, but also holds countless moments of suffering. Yet it is in those moments that we are refined, strengthened, and taught that no path to peace is free from trials. And when we learn to face ourselves, our hearts will open like a lotus blooming in the muddy waters, shining with deep spiritual values and a strong belief in life itself.